Hi everybody, Mrs. Singerly here, and today we're going to be doing the last part of our cells lecture, which is going to be all about cell size. I don't know if you've noticed this, but we need a microscope to see cells. Cells are small, and you're probably asking yourself, Mrs. Singerly, why are cells small? Well, here we go. So cells, if they are too big, it's going to take too long for materials to diffuse into or out of it. And so as a cell gets larger, they have a choice. They can either divide and be small again or die. And so they really need to be small. And it has to do with something called the surface area to volume ratio. And in a small cell, there is a lot of surface area compared to its volume. And that basically means that materials really don't have to move a large distance to get to where they're going and to get to where they're needed. And so when we look at cells, we want there to be a high surface area to volume ratio. And so what you're seeing on your screen is you're seeing three cells, small, medium, and large. And what they've done is they've calculated the surface area and they've calculated the volume. And so the surface area is 6 centimeters squared, and the volume of this cube is 1 centimeters cubed. And so basically a ratio, all it is comparing the numerator to the denominator. And so our numerator is going to be our surface area, and the denominator is going to be the volume. So it'd be 6 over 1. And if we write that as a ratio, it would be 6:1, 6 to 1. And so basically that means that there's 6 times the surface area for every unit of volume. And we want there to be a big difference between those numbers, right? So the bigger the difference between the surface area and the volume, the better. That means that we have a lot of surface area for very little volume. If we look and we go up to the medium cell, its surface area to volume ratio is only 3 to 1, and the large cell, it goes down to 2 to 1. So the large cell has very little difference. We say it has a low surface area to volume ratio, meaning that there's very little difference between the amount of surface area and the amount of volume. And for a cell to function efficiently, it needs a lot of surface area to service its volume. Now, the other thing that I want you to notice with these is, remember I said it was numerator over denominator. So for the middle cell, it would be 24 over 8. So we would just reduce that fraction down, and that's how they're getting 3 to 1. Same thing with this, we had 54 over 27. If we reduce that fraction, it would be 2 over 1, or a surface area volume ratio of 2 to 1. Now sometimes, right, because 6 over 1 is 6. 3 over 1 is 3. So sometimes you'll see the surface area to volume ratio written as, say, 6 to 1 or 3 to 1, or because once we've reduced it down to the over 1 unit of volume, sometimes it'll just be a whole number. So they'll say the surface area to volume is 6. What that means is 6 over 1. And what you're going to learn in the virtual lab that you're going to do after this lecture today is you're going to learn how to mathematically calculate the surface area and the volume and be able to figure out the surface area to volume ratio, which is something that you might have to do on the AICE exam, okay? Now, why is this surface area so important? It's important because the cell has to obtain necessary resources, and it has to do that fairly quickly. It has to eliminate waste products, and it also has to do that fairly quickly. Having a high surface area is also going to influence how the cells acquire, so get or dissipate, release heat energy. We'll talk a little more about that in a second, or exchange chemicals and energy with the environment. And so the analogy I use for this is swimming underwater. So imagine if you were to get, say, in a hot tub or like a kiddie pool, right? And I asked you to go underwater and hold your breath from one side to the other. Everybody could do it, right? Everybody could hold their breath in a kiddie pool or hot tub, go underwater and swim from one cell to the other. Don't do that. Don't actually do that, but it's an analogy, okay? Now, if I asked you to get into an Olympic-sized swimming pool and jump in and hold your breath and swim from one side to the other in a whole class, you know, maybe there's a person that could do it, but for the majority of people, they wouldn't be able to do that. And just like with cells, if you can't get the oxygen and the resources across, the cell is going to die. And so smaller cells, they more efficiently exchange materials with their environment. And when the lab that you're going to be doing today, the virtual lab, you are going to be taking what they call these agar blocks. Agar is a material that's extracted out of seaweed. It's almost similar to a gelatin-like feel to it, and we're putting into it an indicator. Remember that an indicator is something that changes color in the presence of a substance to let you know that it's there or a certain reaction is happening. And so with this indicator that we're using, it's going to change color in presence of an acid. And so we're going to put these agar blocks in vinegar, which is an acid. And the more color change there is, and we're going to measure the amount of color change, that's showing us how far the molecules, the acid molecules, were able to get into the cell. And so this is kind of the end result. Notice that we're seeing that in the large cell, there's barely any color change. So if we were to measure that, it'd be a very small amount. In the medium-sized cell, there's more. And in the smaller cell, that's where we saw the most color change. That means that more of the molecules were able to diffuse or move into the cell and get farther. And that's showing us, you know, how important that surface area to volume ratio is. Now, fun facts about the acquiring or dissipating heat energy. For humans that live in a really cold climate, so maybe they live near the Arctic Circle, or they live in Peru where it's really cold, humans that have evolved and lived in those places have shorter limbs, have shorter arms and shorter legs. Why? Because they want to have less surface area, so that way they slow the dissipation, the release of heat energy. It helps keep their body warmer. Where humans that have evolved to live in very coastal areas, warmer climates, have longer limbs and have more surface area, more places to kind of dissipate that thermal or that heat energy. So to summarize, as a cell gets larger, the volume increases along with the demand for internal resources. And that surface area and the ability to move resources decreases as the volume gets bigger. So because the volume actually increases faster than the surface area. And so as the volume increases, the surface area's ability to move the resources to where they need to go efficiently and quick enough, it decreases. And so we see as a cell gets larger and larger and larger, it doesn't have enough surface area to service its volume. And so low surface area to volume ratio is not good. We want there to be a high surface area to volume ratio. And we see that even in some cells, they'll have adaptations to kind of increase the exchange of materials. This is a small intestine cell with something called microvilli, like these little finger-like projections. And these reside in our small intestine. Don't know if you know this, but small intestine is where the majority of our digestion happens and the absorption of our nutrients. And so to increase the amount of absorption of those nutrients, we increase the surface area of these cells by having these finger-like projections. So we can get more nutrients, can kind of get absorbed into the cell and then into our bloodstream. Simple organisms take in substances over their body surfaces, and their needs are determined by that surface area to volume ratio. And so as organisms increase in size, their surface area doesn't increase at the same rate as their volume. And where this becomes really important is with puppies and kittens and babies. The surface area to volume ratio of a puppy is several times greater than that of an adult dog. They have a lot of surface area for a little amount of volume. And so if we want to suggest a reason why puppies are more at risk of losing their body heat, becoming hypothermic, and dying than adult dogs, why they can't regulate their body temperatures, it has to do with that surface area to volume ratio. Right? Dogs lose heat over their body surfaces, and puppies have a large surface area to volume ratio, and so they lose heat more readily. If you've ever watched like human babies be born, as soon as the baby is born, one of the things they wrap the baby up in a blanket, and it's really important that babies are swaddled and kept in blankets and kept warm enough because they can't regulate their own body temperature. They become hypothermic. Means their body temperature can become very cold very quickly because they're losing too much heat from all that surface area, which can be fatal. And so that's why puppies have to be kept warm, and babies have to be kept warm, and it has to do with this surface area to volume ratio. So that is the end of our cells lecture. You can see jellyfish stinging under a microscope. And that's actually going to be the next thing that we're going to learn about is microscope. So I hope that this was helpful. And the next thing you're going to do is go and work on the virtual lab on surface area to volume ratio.